Really? Hi guys. Let me get Carly for in a sec. I totally just started this without getting her. I'm so sorry. Uh, she's shy. Oh, friend apparently. All right, we're gonna continue reading the book, chapter 9, The Writing on the Wall. What's going on here? What's going on? Attracted, no doubt, by Malfoy's shout, Argus Filch came shouldering his way through the crowd. Then he saw Mrs. Norris and fell back, clutching his face in horror. My cat! My cat! What's happened to Mrs. Norris? He shrieked. And his popping eyes fell on Harry. You! He screeched. You murdered my cat! You've killed her! I'll kill you! Argus? Dumbledore had arrived on the scene, followed by a number of other teachers. In seconds, he had swept past Harry, Ron, and Hermione and detached Mrs. Norris from the torch bracket. Yes, he said to Filch. You too, Mr. Potter, Mrs. Weasley, Miss Granger. Lockhart stepped forward eagerly. My office is nearest, Headmaster, just upstairs. Please feel free. Thank you, Gilderoy, said Dumbledore. The silent crowd parted to let them pass. Lockhart looked excited and important, hurried after Dumbledore. So did Professor McGonagall and Snape. Cannot speak. As they entered Lockhart's darkened office, there was a flurry of movement across the walls. Harry saw several of the Lockharts in the pictures dodging out of sight, their hair in rollers. The real Lockhart lit the candles on his desk and stood back. Dumbledore laid Mrs. Norris on the polished surface and began to examine her. Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged tense looks and sank into chairs outside the pool of candlelight, watching. The tip of Dumbledore's long, crooked nose was barely an inch from Mrs. Norris's fur. He was looking at her closely through his half-moon spectacles, his long fingers gently prodding and poking. Professor McGonagall was bent almost as close, her eyes narrowed. Snape loomed behind them, half in the shadows, wearing a most peculiar expression. It was as though he was trying hard not to smile. And Lockhart was hovering around all of them, making suggestions. It was definitely a curse that killed her, probably the transmogrifian the transmogrifian torture. I've seen it used many times. So unlucky I wasn't there. I know the very counter curse that would have saved her. Lockhart's comments were punctuated by Filch's dry, racking sobs. He was slumped in a chair by the desk, unable to look at Mrs. Norris, his face in his hands. Much as he detested Filch, Harry couldn't help feeling a bit sorry for him, though not nearly as sorry as he felt for himself. If Dumbledore believed Filch, he would be expelled for sure. Dumbledore was now muttering strange words under his breath and tapping Mrs. Norris with his wand, but nothing happened. She continued to look as though she had been recently stuffed. I remember something very similar happening in... I do not know how to pronounce this. Ouagadogou. Oh God, oh God, to go. So I'm smart, but I'm not that smart to know weird words like that. It's probably a real place, but I'm sorry. Said Lockhart, a series of attacks, the full stories in my autobiography. I was able to provide the townsfolk with various amulets, which cleared the matter up at once. The force of Lockhart on the wall were all nodding in agreement as he talked. One of them had forgotten to remove his hairnet. At last, Dumbledore straightened up. She's not dead, Argus, he said softly. Lockhart stopped abruptly in the middle of counting the number of murders he had prevented. Not dead, choked Filch, looking through his fingers at Mrs. Norris. But why is she all stiff and frozen? She's been petrified, said Dumbledore. Ah, I thought so, said Lockhart, in parentheses. But how I cannot say. Ask him, shrieked Filch, turning his blotched and tear-stained face to Harry. I'm laughing at Lockhart, I'm so sorry. No second year could have done this, said Dumbledore firmly. It would take dark magic at the most advanced. He did it, Filch spat, his pouchy face purpling. You saw what he wrote on the wall. He found in my office. He knows I'm a... Filch's face worked horribly. He knows I'm a squib, he finished. I never touched Mrs. Norris, Harry said loudly, uncomfortably aware of everyone looking at him, including all the Lockharts on the walls. And I don't even know what a squib is. Rubbish, snarled Filch. He saw my quick spell letter. If I might speak, Headmaster, said Snape from the shadows, and Harry's sense of foreboding increased. He was sure nothing Snape had to say. Pardon me. He was sure nothing Snape had to say was going to do him any good. Potter and his friends may have simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, he said, a slight sneer curling his mouth as though he doubted it. But we do have a set of suspicious circumstances here. Why was he in the upstairs corridor at all? Why wasn't he at the Halloween feast? Harry, Ron, and Hermione all launched into an explanation about the Death Day party. There were hundreds of ghosts. They'll tell you we were there. But why not join the feast afterwards? Said Snape, his black eyes glittering in the candlelight. Why go why go up to that corridor? Ron and Hermione looked at Harry. Because Harry said, his heart thumping very fast. Something told him it would sound very far-fetched if he told him they had been led there by a bodiless voice no one but he could hear. Because we were tired and wanted to go to bed, he said. Without any supper, said Snape, a triumphant smile flickering across his gaunt face. I didn't think ghosts provided food fit for living people at their parties. We weren't hungry, said Ron loudly, as his stomach gave a huge rumble. Snape's nasty smile widened. I suggest, Headmaster, that Potter is not being entirely truthful, he said. It might be a good idea if he were deprived of certain privileges until he is ready to tell us the whole story. I personally feel he should be taken off the Gryffindor Quidditch team until he is ready to be honest. I may hear Harry just yelling in outrage about that in the back of the headspace. Harry! Shh, child. Really, Severus, said Professor McGonagall sharply. I see no reason to stop the boy playing Quidditch. This cat wasn't hit over the head with a broomstick. There's no evidence at all that Potter had done anything wrong. Dumbledore was giving Harry a searching look. His twinkling light blue gaze made Harry feel as though he was being x-rayed. Innocent until proven guilty, Severus, he said firmly. Snape looked furious. So did Filch. My cat has been petrified, he shrieked, his eyes popping. I want to see some punishment. We will be able to cure her, Argus, said Dumbledore patiently. Professor Sprout recently managed to procure some mandrakes. As soon as they have reached their full size, I will have a potion made that will revive Mrs. Norris. I'll make it, Lockhart butted in. I must have done it 100 times. I could whip a mandrake restorative drop in my sleep. Excuse me, said Snape icily, but I believe I am the potions master in this school. This was a very awkward pause. There was a very awkward pause. Pardon me. You may go, Dumbledore said to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They went as quickly as they could without actually running. When they were a floor up from Lockhart's office, they turned into an empty classroom and closed the door quietly behind them. Harry squinted at his friends' darkened faces. Do you think I should have told them about the voices I heard? No, said Ron, without hesitation. Hearing voices no one else can hear isn't a good sign, even in the wizarding world. Something in Ron's voice made Harry ask, You do believe me, don't you? Of course I do, said Ron quickly. But you must admit it's weird. I know it's weird, said Harry. The whole thing's weird. When was the writing on the wall? What was the writing on the wall about? The chamber has been opened. What's that supposed to mean? You know, it sort of rings a bell, said Ron slowly. I think someone told me a story about a secret chamber at Hogwarts once. Might have been Bill. And what on earth is a squib? Said Harry. To his surprise, Ron stifled a snigger. Well, it's not really funny, but as it's Filch, he said, a squib is someone who is born into a wizarding family but hasn't got any magical powers, kind of the opposite of muggle-born wizards, but squibs are quite unusual. If Filch trying to learn magic from a quick spell course, I reckon he must be a squib. It would explain a lot, like why he hates students so much. Ron gave a satisfied smile. He's bitter. A clock chimed somewhere. Midnight, said Harry. We better go to bed before Snape comes along and tries to frame us for something else. For a few days, the school could talk of little else but the attack on Mrs. Norris. Filch kept it fresh in everyone's mind by pacing in the spot where she had been attacked, as though he thought the attacker might come back. Harry had seen him scrubbing the message on the wall with Mrs. Scour's all-purpose magical mess remover, but to no effect. The words still gleamed as brightly as ever on the stone. When Filch was guarding the scene of the crime, he was skulking red-eyed through the corridors, lunging out at unsuspecting students and trying to put them in detention for things like breathing loudly and looking happy. Ginny Weasley seemed very disturbed by Mrs. Norris's fate. According to Ron, she was a great cat lover. But you haven't really got to know Mrs. Norris, Ron told her, bracingly. Honestly, we're much better off without her. Ginny's lip trembled. Stuff like this doesn't happen often at Hogwarts, Ron reassured her. They'll catch the maniac who did it and have him out of here in no time. I just hope he's got time to catch it by Filch before he's expelled. I'm only joking, Ron added hastily as Ginny blanched. The attack had also had an effect on Hermione. It was quite unusual for Hermione to spend a lot of time It was quite usual for Hermione to spend a lot of time reading, but she was now doing almost nothing else. Nor could Harry and Ron get much response from her when they asked her what she was up to. And not until the following Wednesday did they find out. Harry had been held back in potions where Snape had made him stay behind to scrape tube worms off the desk. After a hurried lunch, he went upstairs to meet Ron in the library, and Justin Finch-Fletchley, the Hufflepuff, yes. The Hufflepuff boy from Herbology coming towards them. Harry had just opened his mouth to say hello when Justin caught sight of him, turned abruptly, and sped off in the opposite direction. Harry found Ron at the back of the library, measuring his history of magic homework. Professor Binns had asked for a 3-foot-long composition on the medieval assembly of European wizards. Imagine that's what your homework was. You had to measure your homework to see if you got 3-foot parchment. Like, dang. I'd rather just have a 3-page essay, you know? Seriously, I'd rather have a 3-page essay. 3 foot more than 3 pages? Or less? I don't know. I'm not mathy. I don't believe it. I'm still 8 inches short, said Ron furiously, letting go of his parchment, which sprang back into a roll. And Hermione's done 4 feet 7 inches, and her writing's tiny. Where is she? Asked Harry, grabbing the tape measure and unrolling his own homework. Somewhere over there, said Ron, pointing along the shelves, looking for another book. I think she's trying to read the whole library before Christmas. Harry told Ron about Justin Finch-Fletchley running away from him. Don't know why you care. I thought he was a bit of an idiot, said Ron, scribbling away, making his writing as large as possible. All that junk about Lockhart being so great? Hermione emerged from between the bookshelves. She looked irritable and at last seemed ready to talk to them. All the copies of Hogwarts of History have been taken out, she said, sitting down next to Harry and Ron, and there's a 2-week waiting list. I wish I hadn't left my copy at home, but I couldn't fit it in my trunk with all Lockhart's books. Why do you want it? Said Harry. The same reason everyone else wants it, said Hermione, to read up on the legend of the Chamber of Secrets. What's that? Said Harry quickly. That's just it. I can't remember, said Hermione, biting her lip, and I can't find the story anywhere. Hermione, let me read your composition, said Ron desperately, checking his watch. No, I won't, said Hermione, suddenly severe. You've had 10 days to finish it. I only need another 2 inches. Come on. The bell rang. Ron and Hermione led the way to History of Magic, bickering. History of Magic was the dullest subject on their schedule. Professor Binns, who taught it, was their only ghost teacher. And the most exciting thing that had ever happened in his class was him entering the room through the blackboard. Ancient and shriveled, many people said he hadn't noticed he was dead. He had simply got up to teach one day and left his body behind in an armchair in front of the staff room fire. His routine had not varied in the slightest sense. Today was as boring as ever. Professor Bind opened his notes and began to read in a flat drone like an old vacuum cleaner until nearly everyone in the class was in a deep stupor, occasionally coming too long enough to copy down a name or a date, then falling asleep again. He had been speaking for half an hour when something happened that never happened before. Hermione put up her hands. Professor Binns, glancing up in the middle of a deadly dull lecture on the International Warlock Convention of 1289, looked amazed. Mr. Granger, Professor, I was wondering if you could tell us anything about the Chamber of Secrets, said Hermione in a clear voice. Dean Thomas, who had been sitting with his mouth hanging open, gazing out the window, jerked out of his trance. Lavender Brown's head came up off her arms, and Neville Longbottom's elbow slipped off his desk. Professor Binns blinked. My subject is history of magic, he said in his dry, wheezy voice. I deal with facts, Miss Granger, not myths and legends. He cleared his throat with a small voice like chalk snapping and continued. In September of that year, a subcommittee of Sardinian sorcerers. He started to a halt. Hermione's hand was waving in the air again. Miss Grant? Please, sir, don't legends always have a basis in fact? Professor Binns was looking at her in such amazement. Harry was sure no student had ever interrupted him before, alive or dead. Well, said Professor Binns slowly, yes, one could argue that, I suppose. He peered at Hermione as though he had never seen a student properly before. However, the legend of which you speak is such a very sensational, even ludicrous tale. But the whole class was now hanging on Professor Binns' every word. He looked dimly at them all. Every face turned to his. Harry could tell he was completely thrown by such an unusual show of interest. Oh, very well, he said slowly. Let me see. The Chamber of Secrets. You all know, of course, that Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago. The precise date is uncertain, by the four greatest witches and wizards of the age. The four schoolhouses are named after them. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. They built this castle together, far from the prying eyes of muggles, for it was an age when magic was feared by common people, and witches and wizards suffered much persecution. He paused, gazed blearily around the room, and continued. For a few years, the founders worked in harmony together, seeking out youngsters who showed signs of magic and bringing them to the castle to be educated. But then disagreements sprang up between them. A rift began to grow between Slytherin and the others. Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts. He believed that magical learning should be kept within all magic families. He disliked taking students of Muggle parentage, believing them to be untrustworthy. After a while, there was a serious argument on the subject between Slytherin and Gryffindor, and Slytherin left the school. Professor Binns paused again, pursing his lips, looking like a wrinkled old tortoise. Reliable historical sources tell us this much, he said, but these honest facts have been obscured by the fanciful legend of the Chamber of Secrets. The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle of which the other founders knew nothing. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets and unleash the horrors within, and use it to purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic. There was silence as he finished telling the story, but it wasn't the usual sleepy silence that filled Professor Binns' classroom. There was unease in the air as everyone continued to watch him, hoping for more. Professor Binns looked faintly annoyed. The whole thing is errant nonsense, of course, he said. Naturally, the school has been searched for evidence of such a chamber many times, but the most learned witches and wizards by the most learned witches and wizards. It does not exist. A tale told to frighten the gullible. Hermione's hand was back in the air. Sir, what exactly do you mean, the horror within the chamber? Hang on, I need water. I'm dying. I want iced tea. I don't think we have iced tea. I need to make iced tea. I will at least convince James to make the iced tea because we both like it. How long until the end of this chapter? So I know. Oh, geez. Okay. 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 I have a ways to go. That is believed to be some sort of monster which the heir of Slytherin alone can control, said Professor Binns in his dry, greedy voice. The class exchanged nervous looks. I tell you, the thing doesn't I tell you, the thing does not exist, said Professor Binns, shuffling his notes. There's no chamber and no monster. But, sir, said Seamus Finnegan, if the chamber could only be opened by Slytherin's true heir, no one else would be able to find it, would they? Nonsense, O'Flannery. I don't know. O'Flaherty? It's Oflaherty, so O'Flaherty. Ben, stop mispronouncing people's names, please. You're worse than You're like Mr. D. You're worse than Mr. D. People who understand the Percy Jackson reference I made, I'm happy. Said Professor Binns in an aggravated tone. If a long succession of Hogwarts headmasters and headmistresses haven't found the thing, but Professor, piped up Pravarti Patil, you'd probably have to use dark magic to open it. Just because a wizard doesn't use dark magic doesn't mean he can't, Miss Pennyfeather, snapped Professor Binns. I repeat, if the likes of Dumbledore, but maybe you've got to be related to Slytherin, so Dumbledore couldn't, began Dean Thomas, but Professor Binns had had enough. That will do, he said sharply. It is a myth. It does not exist. There is not a shred of evidence that Slytherin ever built so much as a secret broom cupboard. I regret telling you such a foolish story. We will turn, if you please, to history, to solid, believable, verifiable fact. And within 5 minutes, the class had sunk back into its usual torpor. I always knew Salazar Slytherin was a twisted old loony, Ron told Harry and Hermione as they fought their way through the teeming corridors at the end of the lesson to drop off their bags before dinner. But I never knew he started all this pureblood stuff. I wouldn't be in his house if you paid me. Honestly, if the Sorting Hat had tried to put me in Slytherin, I'd get on the train straight back home. Hermione nodded fervently, but Harry didn't say anything. His stomach had just dropped unpleasantly. Harry had never told Ron and Hermione that the Sorting Hat had seriously considered putting him in Slytherin. He could remember as though it was yesterday the small voice that had spoken in his ear when he had placed the hat on his head a year before. You could be great, you know. It's all in your head. Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that. But Harry, who had already heard of Slytherin House's reputation for turning out dark wizards, had thought desperately, not Slytherin. And the hat had said, oh, well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. I said that so chipper. Jeez. Hi, Harry. Sorry. As they were shunted along in the throng, Colin Creevy went past. Hi, Harry. Okay. Hello, Colin, said Harry automatically. Harry, a boy in my class has been saying you're... But Colin was so small he couldn't fight against the tide of people bearing him toward the Great Hall. They heard him squeak, see you, Harry. And he was gone. What's a boy in his class saying about you? Hermione wondered. That I'm Slytherin's heir, I expect, said Harry, his stomach dropping another inch or so as he suddenly remembered the way Justin Finch Fletchley had run away from him at lunchtime. People here will believe anything, said Ron in disgust. The crowd thinned, and they were able to climb the next staircase without difficulty. Do you really think there's a chamber of secrets? Ron asked Hermione. I don't know, she said, frowning. Dumbledore couldn't... I lost my page. Dumbledore couldn't cure Mrs. Norris, and that makes me think that whatever attacked her might not be, well, human. As she spoke, they turned a corner and found themselves at the very end of the corridor where the attack happened. They stopped and looked. The scene was just as it had been that night, except there was no stiff cat hanging from the torch bracket, and an empty chair stood against the wall bearing the message, "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened." That's where Filch has been keeping guard, Ron muttered. They looked at each other. The corridor was deserted. Can't hurt to have a poke around, said Harry, dropping his bag and getting to his hands and knees so that he could crawl along, searching for clues. Scorch marks, he said. Here and here. Come and look at this, said Hermione. This is funny. Harry, I'm gonna sneeze. Sorry. Stop looking at me. You're making me. Okay. I don't know. My sneeze is here. What? I give up. Um, up there. Harry got up and crossed to the window next to the message on the wall. Hermione was pointing at the topmost pane, where around 20 spiders were scuttling, apparently fighting to get through a small crack. A long silvery thread was dangling like a rope, as though they had all climbed in their hurry to get outside. Have you seen spiders act like that? Said Hermione wonderingly. No, said Harry. Have you, Ron? Ron. He looked over his shoulder. Ron was standing well back and seemed to be fighting the impulse to run. What's up? Said Harry. I don't like spiders, said Ron tensely. I never knew that, said Hermione, looking at Ron in surprise. You've used spiders and potions loads of times. I don't mind them dead, said Ron, who was carefully looking away anywhere but the window. I just don't like the way they move. Hermione giggled. It's not funny, said Ron fiercely. You must know, when I was 3, Fred turned my teddy bear into a giant, big, filthy spider because I broke his toy broomstick. You wouldn't like them either if you'd been holding your bear and suddenly had too many legs. And he broke off, shuddering. Hermione was obviously still trying not to laugh. Thinking that they had better get off that subject, Harry said, Remember all that water on the floor? Where did it come from? Someone's mopped it up. It was about here, said Ron, recovering himself to walk a few paces past Filch's chair and pointing level with this door. He reached for the brass doorknob, but suddenly withdrew his hand as though he had been burned. What's the matter? Said Harry. Can't go in there, said Ron gruffly. That's a girl's toilet. Oh, Ron, there won't be anyone in there, said Hermione, standing up and coming over. That's Moaning Myrtle's place. Come on, let's have a look. And ignoring the large out of order sign, she opened the door. It was the gloomiest, most depressing bathroom Harry had ever set foot in. Under a large, cracked and spotted mirror were a row of chip sinks. The floor was damp and reflected the dull light given off by the stubs of a few candles, burning low in their holders. The wooden doors to the stalls were flaking and scratched, and one of them was dangling off its hinges. Hermione put her fingers to her lips and set off towards the end stall. When she reached it, she said, Hello, Myrtle. How are you? Harry and Ron went to look. Moaning Myrtle was floating above the tank of the toilet, picking a spot on her chin. This is the girls' bathroom, she said, eyeing Ron and Harry suspiciously. They're not girls. No, Hermione agreed. I just wanted to show them how nice it is in here. She waved vaguely at the dirty old mirror and the damp floor. Ask her if she saw anything, Harry mouthed at Hermione. What are you whispering? Said Myrtle, staring at him. Nothing, said Harry quickly. We wanted to ask. I wish people would stop talking behind my back, said Myrtle in a voice choked with tears. I do have feelings, you know, even if I am dead. Myrtle, no one wants to upset you, said Hermione. Harry only, no one wants to upset me. That's a good one, howled Myrtle. My life was nothing but misery at this place, and now people come along ruining my death. We wanted to ask you if you've seen anything funny lately, said Hermione quickly, because a cat was attacked right outside your front door on Halloween. Did you see anything? Did you see anyone near here that night? Said Harry. I wasn't paying attention, said Myrtle dramatically. Peeves upset me so much I came in here and tried to kill myself. Then, of course, I remembered that I'm already dead, said Ron helpfully. Myrtle gave a tragic sob, rose up in the air, turned over, and dived headfirst into the toilet, splashing water all over them and vanishing from sight, although from the direction of her muffled sobs she had come to rest somewhere in the U-bend. Harry had barely closed the door on Myrtle's gurgling sobs when a loud voice made all 3 of them jump. Run! Percy Weasley had stopped dead at the head of the stairs, prefect badge agleam, an expression of complete shock on his face. That's a girl's bathroom, he gasped. What are you? Just having a look around, Ron shrugged. Clues, you know? Percy swelled in a manner that reminded Harry forcefully of Mrs. Weasley. Get away from there, Percy said, striding toward them and starting to bustle them along, flapping his arms. Don't you care what this looks like? Coming back here while everyone is at dinner. Why shouldn't we be here? Said Ron hotly, stopping short and glaring at Percy. Listen, we never laid a finger on that cat. That's what I told Ginny, said Percy fiercely. But she still seems to think you're going to get expelled. I've never seen her so upset, crying her eyes out. You must think of her. All the first years are thoroughly overexcited about this business. You don't care about Ginny, said Ron, whose ears were now reddening. You're just worried. I'm going to mess up your chances of being head boy. 5 points from Gryffindor, Percy said tersely, fingering his prefect badge. And I hope it teaches you a lesson. No more detective work or I'll write to Mum. And he strode off, the back of his neck red as Ron's ears. Harry, Ron, and Hermione chose seats as far as possible from Percy in the common room that night. Ron was still in a very bad temper and kept blotting his charms homework. When he reached absently for his mind to remove the smudges, it ignited the parchment. Fuming almost as much as his homework, Ron slammed the standard book of spells, grade 2, shut. To Harry's surprise, Hermione followed suit. Who can it be, though? She said in a quiet voice, as though continuing a conversation they had been having. Who'd want to frighten all the squibs and muggleborns out of Hogwarts? Let's think, said Ron in mock puzzlement. Who do we know who thinks all muggleborns are scum? He looked at Hermione. Hermione looked back, unconvinced. If you're talking about Malfoy, of course I am, said Ron. You heard him. You'll be next, mudbloods. Come on. You've only got to look at his foul rat face to know it's him. Malfoy, the heir of Slytherin, said Hermione skeptically. Look at his family, said Harry, closing his book too. The whole lot of them have been in Slytherin. He's always boasting about it. They could have easily be Slytherin's descendants. His father, definitely evil, though. Draco said he agrees with that statement, that his father is evil. They could have had the key to the Chamber of Secrets for centuries. It's not a key, said Ron, handing it down father to son. Well, said Hermione cautiously, I suppose it's possible, but how do we prove it? Said Harry darkly. There might be a way, said Hermione slowly, dropping her voice still further with a quick glance around the room at Percy. Of course it would be difficult and dangerous, very dangerous. We'd be breaking about 50 school rules, I expect. If in a month or so you feel like explaining, no, won't you? Said Ron irritably. All right, said Hermione coldly. What we'd need to do is to go inside the Slytherin common room and ask Malfoy a few questions without him realizing it's us. But that's impossible, Harry said as Ron laughed. No, it's not, said Hermione. All we'd need would be some Polyjuice potion. What's that? Ron and Harry asked together. Snape mentioned it in a class a few weeks ago. Do you think we've not got Do you think we've got nothing better to do in potions than listen to Snape? Muttered Ron, and he's your teacher. You should be listening to him. I'm sorry. I don't care how much you hate Snape. You've got to listen to him. He's teaching you. Stop holding grudges against learning. It transforms you into somebody else. Think about it. We could change into 3 of the Slytherins. No one would know it was us. Sorry. All right. It transfers you into somebody else. Think about it. We could change the 3 of the Slytherins. No one would know it was us. Malfoy could probably tell us anything. He'd probably be boasting about it in the Slytherin common room right now, if only we could hear him. This Polyjuice stuff sounds a bit dodgy to me, said Ron, frowning. What if you were stuck looking like 3 of the Slytherins forever? It wears off after a while, said Hermione, waving her hand impatiently, but getting a hold of the recipe will be very difficult. Snape said it was in a book called Most Potent Potions, and it's bound to be in the restricted section of the library. There was only one way to get a book from the restricted section. You needed a signed note of permission from a teacher. Hard to see why we'd want the book, really, said Ron, if we were going to try and make one of the potions. I think, said Hermione, that if we made it sound as though we were interested in the theory, we might stand a chance. Oh, come on! No teacher's going to fall for that, said Ron. He'd have to be really thick. Locker! Locker! Sorry, was that a sneeze? Chapter 10, The Rogue Bludger. I'm going to pause there real quick to get a drink of water. Enjoy. Okay, is that so? Yeah. Chapter 10, The Rogue Bludger. Since the disastrous episode of the Pixies, Professor Locker had not brought creatures to class. Instead, he read passages from his books to them, and sometimes reenacted to some of the more dramatic bits. He usually picked Harry to help him with these reconstructions. So far, Harry had been forced to play a simple Transylvanian villager, whom Lockhart had cured of the babbling curse, a yeti with a head cold, a vampire who had been able to eat anything except lettuce since Lockhart had dealt with him. Harry was hauled in front of the class during their very next Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson, this time acting a werewolf. If, if, if he hadn't had a very good reason for keeping Lockhart in a good mood, he would have refused to do it. Nice loud howl, Harry, exactly. And then, if you'll believe it, I pounced like this, slammed him into the floor, and thus, with one hand, I managed to hold him down. The other, I pulled my wand to his throat. I then screwed up all my remaining strength and performed the immensely complex amorphous charm. He let out a piteous moan. Go on, Harry. Higher than that. Good. The fur vanished, the fang shrank, and he turned back into a man. Simple yet effective, and another village will remember me forever as their hero who delivered them from the monthly terror of werewolf tax. I think I just said werewolf tax instead of a tax. Okay. The bell rang and Lockhart got to his feet. Homework. Compose a poem about my defeat of the Wagga Wagga werewolf. Signed copies of Magical Me to the author of the best one. I hate Lockhart. I hate him. The class began to leave, and Harry returned to the back of the room where Ron and Hermione were waiting. Ready? Harry muttered. Wait till everyone's gone, said Hermione nervously. All right. She approached Lockhart's desk, a piece of paper clutched tightly in her hand. Harry and Ron right behind her. Professor Lockhart, Hermione stammered. I wanted to get this book out of the library just for background reading. She held out the piece of paper, her hand shaking slightly. But the thing is, it's in the restricted section of the library, so I need a teacher to sign for it. I'm sure it will help me understand the way. I'm sure it would help me understand what you say on Gadding with Ghouls about slow-acting venoms. Ah, Gadding with Ghouls, said Lockhart, taking the note from Hermione and smiling widely at her. Possibly my very favorite book. You enjoyed it? Oh, yes, said Hermione eagerly. So clever the way you trapped the last one with the tea strainer. Okay. Well, I'm sure no one will mind me giving the best student of the year a little extra help, said Lockhart warmly, and he pulled out an enormous peacock quill. Yes, nice, isn't it? He said, misreading the revolted look on Ron's face. I usually save it for book signings. He scrawled an enormous loopy signature on the note and handed it back to Hermione. Don't even think he looked at what he was signing for. You could get him to sign his soul over to the devil and he wouldn't notice. I'm just saying. So, Harry, said Lockhart, while Hermione folded the note with the fumbling fingers and slipped it into her bag. Tomorrow is the first Quidditch match of the season, I believe. Gryffindor against Slytherin, is it not? I hear you're a useful player. I was eager too. I was asked to try for the national squad, but preferred to dedicate my life to the eradication of the dark forces. Still, if you ever feel the need for a little private training, don't hesitate to ask. Always happy to pass on my expertise to less able players. Harry Potter was the first ever first-year seeker in 100 years. I think he should be teaching you, Professor. Can you tell we hate Lockhart? Just a little. Harry made an indistinct noise in his throat and then hurried off after Ron and Hermione. I don't believe it, he said as the three of them examined the signature of the note. He didn't even look at the book we wanted. That's because he's a brainless git, said Ron. But who cares? We've got what we needed. He is not a brainless git. Yes, he is, said Hermione shrilly as they half ran towards the library. Just because he said you were the best student of the year. They dropped their voices as they entered the muffled stillness of the library. Madame Pince, the librarian, was a thin, irritable woman who looked like an undiffered vulture. Most potent potions, she repeated. Blah, blah, blah. Let's try that again. Most potent potions, she repeated suspiciously, trying to take the note from Hermione, but Hermione wouldn't go. I was wondering if I could keep it, she said breathlessly. Oh, come on, said Ron, wrenching it from her grasp and thrusting it at Madame Pince. We'll get you another autograph, Lockhart. We'll sign anything if it stands still long enough. Which is true. Madame Pince held the note up to the light as though determined to detect a forgery, but it passed the test. She stalked away between the lofty shelves and returned several minutes later, carrying in a large and moldy-looking book. Hermione put it carefully into her bag, and they laughed, trying not to walk too quickly or look too guilty. 5 minutes later, they were barricaded in Moaning Myrtle's out-of-order bathroom once again. Hermione had overridden Ron's objections by pointing out it was the last place anyone in their right minds would go, so they were guaranteed some privacy. Moaning Myrtle was crying noisily in her stall, but they were still ignoring her, and she them. Hermione opened most potent potions carefully, and the three of them bent over the damp, spotted pages. It was clear from the glance why it belonged to the restrictions section. Some of the potions had effects almost too gruesome to think about, and there were very unpleasant illustrations, which included a man who had seemed to have turned inside out, and a witch sprouting several extra pairs of arms out of her head. Here it is. Why did I pause? Here it is, said Hermione excitedly, as she found the page headed the Polyjuice Potion. It was decorated with drawings of people halfway transforming into other people. Harry sincerely hoped the artist had imagined looks of intense pain on their faces. This is the most complicated potion I've ever seen, said Hermione as she scanned the recipe. Lacewing flies, leeches, fluxweed, and knotgrass, she murmured, running her fingers down the list of ingredients. Well, they're easy enough. They're in the student store cupboard. We can help ourselves. Oh, look, powdered horn of bicorn. Don't know where we're going to get that. Shredded skin of boomslang. That'll be tricky too. And of course, a bit of whoever we want to change into. Excuse me? Said Ron sharply. What do you mean, a bit of whoever we're changing into? I'm drinking nothing with crab's toenails in it. Hermione continued as though she hadn't heard them. Sorry, I'm very dissociated. Hermione continues as though she hadn't heard him. We don't have to worry about that yet, though, because we add those bits later. We add those bits. To retry. We don't have to worry about that yet, though, because we add those bits later. Ron turned speechless to Harry, who had another worry. Do you realize how much we're going to have to steal, Hermione? Shredded skin of boomslang, that's definitely not on the students' cupboard. What are we going to do, break into Snape's private stores? I don't know if that's such a good idea. Hermione shut the book with a snap. Well, if you two are going to chicken out, fine, she said. There were bright pink patches on her cheeks, and her eyes were brighter than usual. I don't want to break rules, you know. I think threatening muggleborns is far worse than brewing up a difficult potion. But if you don't want to find out if it's Malfoy, I'll go straight to Madam Pince now and hand the book back in. I never thought I'd see the day when you're persuading us to break rules, said Ron. All right, we'll do it, but not toenails, okay? How long will it take to make anyway? Said Harry as Hermione looking happier, opened the book again. Well, since the black sweet has to be picked at the full moon and the lace wings have got to be stewed for 21 days, I'd say it'd be ready in about a month, if we can get all the ingredients. A month? Said Ron. Malfoy could have attacked half the muggleborns in the school by then. But Hermione's eyes narrowed dangerously again, and he added swiftly, but it's the best plan we've got, so go full steam ahead, I guess. However, while Hermione was checking that the coast is clear for them to leave the bathroom, Ron muttered to Harry, "It'll be a lot of hassle if you can just knock Malfoy off his broom tomorrow." It will be a lot less hassle if you can just knock Malfoy off his broom tomorrow. Yeah. Harry woke early on Saturday morning and lay for a while thinking about the coming Quidditch match. He was nervous, mainly at the thought of what Wood would say if Gryffindor lost, but also at the idea of facing a team mounted on the fastest racing brooms Gold could buy. He had never wanted to beat Slytherin so badly. After half an hour of lying there with his insides churning, he got up, dressed, and went down to the breakfast early, where he found the rest of the Gryffindor team huddled at the long, empty table, all looking uptight and not speaking much. At 11 o'clock, as 11 o'clock approached, the whole school started to make its way down to the Quidditch stadium. It was a muggy sort of day, with a hint of thunder in the air. Ron and Hermione came hurrying over to wish Harry good luck as he entered the locker rooms. The team pulled on their scarlet Gryffindor robes, then sat down to listen to Wood's usual pre-match prep talk. Slytherin. Whoever has a list, please vacate the premises. Please, so I can keep reading. Okay, thank you. Slytherin has better brooms than us, he began. No point in denying it. But we've got better people on our brooms. We've trained harder than they have, and we've been flying in all weather. Too true, muttered George Weasley. I haven't been properly dry since August. And we're going to make them rue the day that they let that little bit of slime, Malfoy, buy his way on their team. Chest heaving with emotion, Wood turned to Harry. Okay, Wood, deep breaths, please. Just saying. It'll be down to you, Harry, to show them that a seeker has to have something more than a rich father. Get to that snitch before Malfoy or die trying, Harry, because we've got to win today. We've got to. So no pressure, Harry, said Fred, winking at him. Die trying, Jesus, Wood. As they walked out into the pitch, a roar of noise greeted them, mainly cheers, because Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were anxious to see Slytherin beaten. But the Slytherins in the crowd made their boos and hisses heard too. Madam Hooch, the Quidditch teacher, asked Flint and Wood to shake hands, which they did, giving each other threatening stares and gripping rather harder than necessary. On my whistle, said Madam Hooch. 3, 2, 1. With a roar from the crowd to speed them upward, the 14 players rose towards the leaden sky. Harry flew higher than any of them, squinting around for the snitch. All right there, Scarhead, yelled Malfoy, shooting underneath him as though to show off the speed of his broom. Harry had no time to reply. At that very moment, a heavy black bludger came pelting towards him. He avoided it so narrowly that he felt it ruffle his hair as it passed. Close one, Harry, said George, streaking past him with his club in hand, ready to knock the bludger back towards the Slytherin. Harry saw George give the bludger a powerful whack in the direction of Adrian Pusey, but the bludger changed direction in midair and shot straight for Harry again. Pardon me, give me 2 seconds to look. I just needed to check something. Harry dropped quickly to avoid it, and George managed to hit it hard towards Malfoy. Once again, the bludger swerved like a boomerang and shot at Harry's head. Harry put on a burst of speed and zoomed towards the other end of the pitch. He could hear the bludger whistling along behind him. What was going on? Bludgers never concentrated on one player like this. It was their job to try and unsee as many people as possible. Fred Weasley was waiting for the bludger at the other end. Harry ducked, and as Fred swung at the bludger with all his might, the bludger was knocked off course. Gotcha! Fred yelled happily, but he was wrong. As though it was magnetically attracted to Harry, the bludger pelted after him. Once more, and Harry was forced to fly off at full speed. It had started to rain. Harry felt heavy drops fall into his face, splattering onto his glasses. He didn't have a clue what was going on in the rest of the game until he heard Lee Jordan, who was commenting, say, "Slytherin lead, 60 points to 0. That's a lot of points. The Slytherin's superior brooms were clearly doing their jobs, and meanwhile, the Mad Bludger was doing all it could to knock Harry out of the air. Fred and George was now flying so close to him on either side that Harry could see nothing at all except their flailing arms and had no chance to look for the snitch, let alone to catch it. "Someone's tampered with this bludger," said Fred, grunting, swinging his bat with all his might as it launched a new attack on Harry. "We need a timeout," said George, trying to signal to Wood and to stop the bludger breaking Harry's nose at the same time. Wood had obviously got the message. Madame Hooch's whistle rang out, and Harry, Fred, and George dived from the ground, still trying to avoid the Mad Bludger. "What's going on?" said Wood, as the Gryffindor team huddled together while Slytherin and the crowd jeered. "We're being flattened. Fred, George, where were you when that bludger stopped Angelina scoring?" "We were 20 feet above her, stopping the other bludger from murdering Harry." Oliver, said George angrily. "Someone's fixed it. It won't leave Harry alone. It hasn't gone for anyone else all game. The Slytherins must have been doing something to it." "But the bludgers have been locked in Madame Hooch's office since our last practice, and there was nothing wrong with them then," said Wood anxiously. Madame Hooch was walking towards them. Over her shoulder, Harry could see the Slytherin team jeering and pointing in his direction. "Listen," said Harry as she came nearer and nearer. "With you two flying around me all the time, the only way I'm going to catch the snitch is if it flies up my sleeve. Go back to the rest of the team and let me deal with the rogue one." "Don't be thick," said Fred. "It will take your head off." Wood was looking from Harry to Weasley's. "Oliver, this is insane," said Alesia Spinnet angrily. "You can't let Harry deal with that thing on his own. Let's ask for an inquiry. If we stop now, we'll have to forfeit the match," said Harry. "And we're not losing to Slytherin just because of a crazy bludger. Come on, Oliver, tell them to leave me alone." "This is all your fault," George said angrily to Wood. "Get the snitch or die trying." What a stupid thing to tell him. Yes, because Harry would probably take that to heart. Just saying. Madame Hooch had joined them. "Ready to resume play?" she asked Wood. Wood looked at the determined look on Harry's face. "All right," he said. "Fred, George, you heard Harry, leave him alone and let him deal with the bludger on his own." The rain was falling more heavily now. On Madame Hooch's whistle, Harry kicked hard into the air and heard the telltale whoosh of the bludger behind him. Higher and higher Harry climbed. He looped and swooped, spiraled, zigzagged, and rolled. Slightly dizzy, he nevertheless kept his eyes wide open. Rain was speckling his glasses and ran up his nostrils as he hung upside down, avoiding another fierce dive from the bludger. He could hear laughter from the crowd. He knew he must look very stupid, but the rogue bludger was heavy and couldn't change direction as quickly as Harry could. It began a kind of roller coaster ride around the edges of the stadium, squinting through the silver sheets of rain to the Gryffindor goalpost, where Adrian Pusey was trying to get past Wood. A whistling in Harry's ear told him the bludger had just missed him again. He turned right over and sped in the opposite direction. "Training for the ballet, Potter!" "Yes, Draco, feel free to say your own line," yelled Malfoy as Harry was forced to do a stupid kind of twirl in mid-air to dodge the bludger, and he fled, the bludger trailing a few feet behind him, and then, glaring at Malfoy in hatred, he saw it. The golden snitch. It was hovering inches above Malfoy's left ear, and Malfoy, busy laughing at Harry, hadn't seen it. For an agonizing moment, Harry hung in midair, not daring to speed towards Malfoy in case he looked up and saw the snitch. Swam! He had stayed still a second too long. The bludger had hit him. At last, smashed it into his elbow, and Harry felt his arm break. Dimly, dazed by the searing pain of his arm, he stood sideways on his rain-drenched broom, one knee still crooked over it, his right arm dangling useless at his side, and the bludger came pelting back for a second attack, this time aiming at his face. Harry swerved out of his way. One idea firmly lodged into his brain. Get to Malfoy. Through a haze of rain and pain, he dived for the shimmering, sneering face below him, and saw his eyes widened with fear. Malfoy thought Harry was attacking him. What the? He gasped, craning out of Harry's way. Harry took his remaining hand off his broom and made a wild snatch. His fingers felt his fingers close on the cold snitch, but was now only gripping the broom with his legs, and there was a yell from the crowd below as he headed straight for the ground, trying hard not to pass out. With a splattering thud, he hit the mud and rolled off his broom. His arm was hanging at a very strange angle. Brittle with pain, he heard, as though from a distance, a good deal of whistling and shouting. He focused on the snitch, clutched in his good hand. Aha, he said vaguely. We've won. And he fainted. He came around, rain falling onto his face, still lying on the field with someone leaning over him. He saw a glitter of teeth. Oh no, not you, he moaned. Doesn't know what he's saying, said Lockhart loudly to the anxious crowd of Gryffindors pressing around them. Not to worry, Harry. I'm about to fix your arm. No, said Harry. I'll keep it like it is, thanks. He tried to sit up, but the pain was terrible. He heard a familiar clicking noise nearby. I don't want a photo of this, Colin, he said loudly. Lie back, Harry, said Lockhart soothingly. It's a simple charm. I've used it countless of times. Always say that. Shut up. Okay, back go. Kotsky is being annoying. He's just like, you can hear, my voice is normally up here and I'm very soft. Do you hear how low my fucking voice? Okay, Kachan, go away. Please. Kachan, go away so I can actually read without you anger. You need anger management. Ow! But I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. He needs anger management training. Why can't I just go to the hospital wing? Said Harry through clenched teeth. He should really, Professor, said Buddy Wood, who couldn't help grinning even though his seeker was injured. Great capture, Harry. Really spectacular. Your best yet, I'd say. Through the thicket of legs around him, Harry spotted Fred and George Weasley wrestling the rogue bludger into a box. It was still putting up a terrific fight. Stand back, said Lockhart, who was rolling up his jade green sleeves. No, don't, said Harry weakly, but Lockhart was twirling his wand, and the second lady who directed it straight at Harry's arm. A strange and unpleasant sensation started at Harry's shoulder and spread all the way down to his fingertips. It felt as though his arm was being deflated. He didn't dare look at what was happening. He had shut his eyes, his face turned away from his arm, but his worst fears were realized as the people above him gasped, and Colin Creevy began clicking away madly. His arm didn't hurt anymore, nor did it feel remotely like an arm. Ah, said Lockhart. Yes, well, that can happen sometimes. But the point is, the bones are no longer broken. That's the thing to bear in mind. So, Harry, just toddle up to the hospital wing. Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, would you escort him? And Madame Pomfrey will be able to, tidy you up a bit. As Harry got to his feet, he felt strangely lopsided. Taking a deep breath, he looked down at his right arm. When what he saw nearly made him pass out again. Poking out at the end of his robe looked like a thick, colored rubber glove. He tried to move his fingers. Nothing happened. Lockhart hadn't mended Harry's bones at all. He had removed them. Madame Pomfrey wasn't at all pleased. You should have come straight to me, she raged, holding up the sad, limp remainder of what half an hour before had been a perfectly working arm. I can mend bones in a second, but growing them back, you'll be able to, won't you? Said Harry desperately. I'll be able to, certainly, but it will be painful, said Madame Pomfrey grimly, throwing Harry a pair of pajamas. You'll have to stay the night. Hermione waited outside the curtain drawn around Harry's bed, while Ron helped him into his pajamas. It took a while to stuff the rubbery, boneless arm into a sleeve. How could you stick up for Lockhart now, Hermione, eh? Ron called through the curtain as he pulled Harry's limp fingers through the cuff. If Harry had wanted deboning, he would have asked. Anyone can make a mistake, said Hermione, and it doesn't hurt anymore, does it, Harry? No, said Harry, getting into bed, but it doesn't do anything else either. As he swung himself into the bed, his arm flopped pointlessly. Hermione and Madame Pomfrey came around the curtain. Madame Pomfrey was holding a large bottle of something labeled Skelegro. Hang on, question. How often does it have to happen in the wizarding world for the wizards to come up with a medicine to regrow bones? How often? Like, I just imagine that, though. Oh, you've done it again. You've lost your arm bones, haven't you? Like, what is this? You're in for a rough night, she said, pouring out a steaming beakerful and handing it to him. Regrowing bones is a nasty business. So is taking the Skelegro. It burned Harry's mouth and throat as it went down, making him cough and splutter. Still tut-tutting about dangerous sports and inept teachers, Madame Pomfrey, he's an inept. He is definitely inept. You know what inept means? It means he is not very good at what he's supposed to be doing. He's not a good teacher. He's bad at it. Madame Pomfrey retreated, leaving Ron and Hermione to help Harry gulp down the water. We won, though, said Ron, a grin breaking across his face. That was some catch you made. You made. Apparently I got an Irish accent now. That was some catch you made. Malfoy's face, he looked ready to kill. I want to know how he fixed that bludger, said Hermione darkly. We can add that to a list of questions we'll ask him when we've taken the polyjuice potion, said Harry, sinking back onto the pillows. I hope it tastes better than this stuff. It tastes like mud and piss. So I don't think it tastes better. Take the Skelegro. The door of the hospital wing burst open at that moment. Filthy and soaking wet, the rest of the Gryffindor team had arrived to see Harry. Unbelievable flying, Harry, said George. I've just seen Marcus Flint yelling at Malfoy. Something about having the stitch on the top of his head and not noticing. Malfoy didn't seem too happy. They had brought cakes, sweets, and bottles of pumpkin juice. They gathered around Harry's bed and were just getting started on what promised to be a good party when Madame Pomfrey came storming over, shouting, This boy needs rest. He's got 33 bones to regrow. Out! Out! And Harry was left alone, with nothing to distract him from the stabbing pains in his limp arm. Hours and hours later, Harry woke quite suddenly in the pitch blackness and gave a small yelp of pain. His arm now felt full of large splinters. For a second, he thought that was what he had woken him. Then, with a thrill of horror, he realized that someone was sponging his forehead in the dark. Get off, he said loudly. Then, Dobby? The house elf growled. How many times have I done that? Get some water. Oh, sorry, Salem. She just went, what? Okay, sleep. Wave that feather over my nose so I can sneeze already. Okay. The house elf's goggling tennis ball eyes were peering at Harry through the darkness. A single tear was running down his long, pointed nose. Harry Potter came back to school, he repeated miserably. Dobby warned and warned Harry Potter. Oh, sir, why didn't you heed Dobby? Why didn't Harry Potter go back home when he missed the train? Harry heaved himself up on his pillow and pushed Dobby's sponge away. What are you doing here? He said. And how do you know I missed the train? Dobby's lip trembled, and Harry was seized by a sudden suspicion. It was you, he said slowly. You stopped the barrier from letting us through. Indeed, yes, sir, said Dobby, nodding his head vigorously, ears flapping. Dobby hid and watched for Harry Potter and sealed the gateway, and Dobby had to iron his hands afterwards. He showed Harry 10 long bandaged fingers. But Dobby didn't care, sir, for he thought Harry Potter was safe, and never did Dobby dream that Harry Potter would get to school any another way. Dobby was rocking backward and forward, shaking his ugly head. Dobby was so shocked when he heard Harry Potter was back at Hogwarts, he let his master's dinner burn, so flogging Dobby never had, sir. Harry slumped back onto his pillows. You nearly got me and Ron expelled, he said fiercely. You'd better get lost before my bones come back, Dobby, or I might strangle you. Dobby smiled weakly. Dobby is used to death threats, sir. Dobby gets them 5 times a day at home. He blew his nose on a corner of the filthy pillowcase he wore, looking so pathetic that Harry felt his anger ebb away in spite of himself. Why did you wear that thing, Dobby? Why do you wear that thing, Dobby? He asked carelessly. This, sir? Said Dobby, plucking the pillowcase. 'Tis a mark of the house elf's enslavement, sir. Dobby can only be freed if his masters present him with clothes, sir. The family is careful not to pass Dobby even a sock, sir, for then he would be free to leave their home forever. Who does their laundry? I want to know. Like, if the house elf doesn't do their laundry, who does it? Dobby mopped his bulging eyes and said suddenly, Harry Potter must go home. Dobby thought his bludger would be enough to make... Your bludger? Said Harry, anger rising once more. What do you mean, your bludger? You made the bludger try and kill me? Not kill you, sir. Never kill you, said Dobby, shocked. Dobby wants to save Harry Potter's life. Better sent home grievously injured than remained here, sir. Dobby only wanted Harry Potter to be maimed enough to be sent home. Oh, is that all? Said Harry angrily. I don't suppose you're going to tell me why you wanted me sent home in pieces. Oh, if Harry Potter only knew. Dobby groaned, more tears dripping onto his ragged pillowcase. If he knew what he means to us, to the lowly, the enslaved, we dregs of the magical world. Dobby remembers how it was when he who must not be named was the height of his power, sir. We house elves were treated like vermin, sir. Of course, Dobby is treated like that, stale, sir. Here admitted, drying his face on the pillowcase. But mostly, sir, life has improved for my kind since you triumphed over he who must not be named. Harry Potter survived, and the Dark Lord's powers were broken. It was a new dawn, sir, and Harry Potter shone like a beacon of hope for those who thought the dark days would never end, sir. And now at Hogwarts, terrible things are to happen, are perhaps happening already, and Dobby cannot let Harry Potter stay here now that history is going to repeat itself, now that the Chamber of Secrets is once more open once more. Dobby froze, horror-struck. Then grabbed Harry's water jug from the bedside table and cracked it over his head, toppling out of sight. A second later, he crawled back onto the bed, cross-eyed, muttering, Bad Dobby, very bad Dobby. So there is a Chamber of Secrets, Harry whispered. And did you say it's been opened before? Tell me, Dobby. He saved the... My nose is so itchy. He seized the elf's bony wrist as Dobby's hand inched towards the water jug. But I'm not Muggle-born. How can I be in danger from the chamber? Oh, sir, ask no more of poor Dobby, stammered the elf, his eyes huge in the dark. Dark deeds are planned in this place. Harry Potter must not be here when they happen. Go home, Harry Potter, go home. Harry Potter must not meddle in this, sir. 'Tis too dangerous. Who is it, Dobby? Harry said, keeping a firm hold on Dobby's wrist to stop him from hitting himself with the water jug again. Who's opened it? Who opened it last time? Dobby can't, sir. Dobby can't. Dobby mustn't tell, squealed the elf. Go home, Harry Potter, go home. I'm not going anywhere, said Harry fiercely. One of my best friends is Muggle-born. She'll be the first in line if the chamber really has been opened. Harry Potter risked his own life for his friends, moaned Dobby, in a kind of miserable ecstasy. So noble, so valiant, but he must save himself. He must. Harry Potter must not. Dobby suddenly froze, his bat ears quivering. Harry had heard it, too. There were footsteps coming down the passageway outside. Dobby must go. breathed the elf, terrified. There was a loud crack, and Harry's fist was suddenly clenched on thin air. He slumped back into his bed, his eyes on the dark doorway to the hospital wing, as the footsteps drew nearer. Next moment, Dumbledore was back into the dormitory, wearing a long woolly dressing gown and a nightcap. He was carrying on one end of what looked like a statue. Professor McGonagall appeared a second later, carrying its feet. Together, they heaped it onto a bed. Get Madame Pomfrey, whispered Dumbledore, and Professor McGonagall hurried past the end of Harry's bed out of sight. Harry lay quite still, pretending to be asleep. He heard urgent voices, and then Professor McGonagall swept back into view, closely followed by Madame Pomfrey, who was pulling a cardigan on over her nightdress. He heard a sharp intake of breath. What happened? Madame Pomfrey whispered to Dumbledore, bending over the statue on the bed. Another attack, said Dumbledore. Minerva found him on the stairs. There was a bunch of grapes next to him, said Professor McGonagall. We think he was trying to sneak up here to visit Potter. Harry's stomach gave a horrible lurch. Slowly and carefully, he raised himself a few inches so he could look at the statue in the bed. A ray of moonlight lay across its staring face. It was Colin Creevey. His eyes were wide and his hands were stuck up in front of him, holding his camera. Petrified? Whispered Madame Pomfrey. Yes, Professor McGonagall, but I shudder to think, if Albus hadn't been on the on the way downstairs for hot chocolate, who knows what might have. I like how Dumbledore just casually goes downstairs to the kitchen when he wants hot chocolate. He's just like, I'm gonna go to hot chocolate. Yeah, let's go. The gay child is adorable. Dumbledore's gay. He's very gay for Grindelwald, who is an evil wizard who doesn't reciprocate his feelings. So oof. Yeah. Oh, by the way, we're going to watch both the Fantastic Beasts movies. We're gonna watch all the Harry Potter movies. We're gonna watch all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and we're gonna finish the Marvel movie marathon. Apparently, according to James. So just as a warning. Sorry. The three of them stared down at Colin, then Dumbledore leaned forward and wrenched the camera out of Colin's rigid grip. You don't think he managed to get a picture of his attacker, said Professor McGonagall eagerly. Dumbledore didn't answer. He opened the back of the camera. Good gracious, said Madame Pomfrey. A jet of steam had hissed out of the camera. Harry, 3 beds away, caught the acrid smell of burnt plastic. Melted, said Professor Pomfrey wonderingly. All melted. What does this mean, Albus? Professor McGonagall asked urgently. It means, said Dumbledore, that the Chamber of Secrets is indeed open again. Madame Pomfrey clapped a hand on her mouth. Professor McGonagall stared at Dumbledore. But Albus, surely who? The answer is not who, said Dumbledore, his eyes on Colin. The question is how. And from what Harry could see of Professor McGonagall's shadowy face, she didn't understand this any better than he did. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to that, the chapters. Everything is down below in the description. Hope you enjoyed. Say good night to Salem, who's just curled over there. The kitten. She's purring. And say bye. Thank you for watching.